you all for coming today. Isabel, our one and only granddaughter, is going to read us a little Bible verse.
All right, I'll make it short and sweet, but I just wanted to say that Grandma was very special to each of us. She was very loving, determined, bright, fun, and a little strong-willed. So each day we had with her was very special. Sorry, I'm going to try not to cry. She was a strong daughter of the King, a mother, friend, wife, and grandmother. We never know what the Lord will put into our lives or into our paths, but we do know that each day is new, and we can rejoice and be glad, for it is a day God has created for us to do something great in pursuing His kingdom. This was something Grandma was very special at and in doing. She made every moment and day count, whether it was with her family or if she was by herself cooking in the kitchen. Grandma was a miracle. And I believe that the Lord did something through her last 6 years she had with us while she had cancer. And whether we'll ever discover what her purpose was, I think personally we all know what her purpose was in our lives for pushing through and just gritting out those 6 years that I know she struggled so much in. And I know personally it meant a lot for me, and I'm sure I can speak for most of us. For although she has passed, she has left a legacy of love, memories, and joy, and God created her for many purposes such as this. I'm going to read a quick Bible verse, so it's Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. So it says, "To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sue, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace." Each day and time is special, and Grandma made sure to make the most of that. The Lord creates us for a special time, for we are put here for a purpose, each given a gift by God. So while we cry at her passing, or laugh in the wonderful memories shared, we can do all our purpose, holding on to Grandma and her loving light, moving on to do all for the glory of Christ. Thank you.
I could see why you were her favorite granddaughter. I saw a lot of familiar faces and unfamiliar faces. For those that don't know me, I'm my mom's favorite son. There's nobody that can challenge that. I really spent a lot of time trying to think of the right words and come to the right place for me to speak, to have some closure and to express the love that I have for my mom. And I realized that there's no way that I can summarize her life in the few minutes that I'm going to spend before you. I've been very kindred with my mother my whole life. She's always understood me and got me, and it dawned upon me in the middle of the night. I am going to cry. I'm not going to not try to cry. Wear mine on my sleeve. There's a sign in the classroom I teach and that I put up that said, "Work hard and be kind," and that's the gist of who I think my mom is. And she taught us all sorts of things in life. She taught us really, I think, above and beyond all values was to be kind. There's a book called Wonder that some of you may have heard of or read, and it says, when given the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. And I know that there were plenty of times when my entire family didn't realize how right I was. But I knew I was right at the time. And even in spite of how right I was, my mom chose kind. And she sat by my bedside many evenings and just listened to me. I have boxes of letters that she wrote me in college. I have endless memories of phone calls that she provided me just to make sure that I knew she loved me. She taught us to work hard too. We pulled firewood into our house in the winter. We hung our sheets in the summer, and I was a bedwetter, so I hung my sheets a lot in the summer. That came full circle though at the end. I was very close with her, and she looked at me and she said, "I wet my bed again." And I said, "That's okay, Mom. I'll wash your sheets, but you're hanging them out on the line yourself." I got the beautiful smile that she gives. I can't do anything but feel sadness some days. I feel grief some days, but in the past few weeks, mostly what I felt are thousands and thousands of memories flirting through me. And until I'm able to be with my mom again, I know that I'll have those memories. One of the very last things she said, I was leaving and she was having a hard time talking at that point, more than maybe one or two words. And I looked at her and said, "I love you, Mom, and I know that you love me too," because I thought she wouldn't be able to say much. She said, "Yes, I do love you." And I had 52 years of knowing that every day, and that's not gone. That love will live with me, and I hope to share that love, and I appreciate all of you coming here to share with us, with our family, the joy that my mom brought you. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Jeff. Now it's my turn. I'm going to point out the flowers, which aren't professional. They are from our backyard. And my wife loved her flowers. The dahlias, it's no coincidence, there are 6 of those, big purple guys. And that tall, pretty one in the middle might just be representing a young lady you met just a few minutes ago. The pictures that I've selected to put here are representative of the other thing that Grandma loved big time, and that was her grandchildren. We talked, did things that required our grandchildren to use their imaginations. Up in North Carolina, there's a magic hammock. Could be a hot air balloon, couldn't it? Could be a ship on a stormy sea. It could be anything you wanted it to be. And we enjoyed the magic hammock. And then another fun thing we did, we were very blessed to have our grandchildren every Wednesday, the 3 local grandchildren spent the night with us, and they had dinner with us. And we read stories, we watched movies, but one of the fun things we did was let the kids pick out a couple of things that they would like in a story. And then I would tell a story with those things in it. Anderson, who's around here somewhere, I want to say right there. Anderson once said to me, "Grandpa, could I have a story?" And I went to get a book. And he said, no, I want a story from your mouth. And so we did that. You had to use your imagination. And that's a good thing. Imaginations are what are the start of great creations. Today, I'm going to tell you a story. And I get to choose the characters, and I get to make up the story. This is a little different than the stories that we used to tell. This story is true. Do you remember the stories that we told usually started on the same day of the week? Do you remember what day? Tuesday, that's it. They started on a Tuesday. Well, this one doesn't happen to start on a Tuesday. This starts on March 29th, 1942, and it's a Sunday. There's a little girl born in Bloomfield, New Jersey, to parents who were born in Essen, in Germany. And then the next thing that happened 43 days later, on 5/11/42, May 11th, 1942, a little boy was born in the same town to parents who lived in New Jersey for generations and also lived in Bloomfield, New Jersey. The little boy had a big brother. A few years passed and the boy and girl went to kindergarten, but not in the same school, and they did not know each other. In the spring of 1947, the boy's family now included a sister, and they moved to a small town, a small farm in the nearby town of Livingston, New Jersey. And that was on a Saturday in March, and our mother was worn out from moving and just took all three of us and plunked us in the bathtub. And then out in the backyard, we heard a disturbance, and I remember that little boy jumped out of the bathtub and was looking out the window. There was a man down by the barn with a truck, and he lowered the tailgate on his truck and backed a black horse off the truck. And Black Beauty was the first of many horses, and I mention horses because they will make appearances throughout this story. Horses were a pretty important item in our lives. So now the little boy and his family had 2 dogs, a horse, 3 female cats, which were very fertile. And the boy was just in hog heaven. He was a happy, happy camper. About 7 or 8 years later, the little girl I mentioned moved from Bloomfield with her family to Livingston, and they were about 4 miles away from our farm. But we still didn't know each other, the families didn't know each other. The little girl was about 13 at that time, and there were woods behind her house, and she went exploring and came out the other side of the woods to a small farm that had horses and a stable and a riding ring. And she wore that path out to the point where the lady that owned the horses said, if you want to help with chores, I'll give you riding lessons. Coincidentally, that lady was married to a man who drove a feed truck, and he delivered feed to our farm. And still, the little boy and little girl had not met, not yet. Now, maybe you figured out who the little boy and little girl were. You're pretty sharp grandchildren, I know you figured that one out. Okay, now we're at September 1959. The boy and girl, Grandma and I, were now 17 years old. We were in the same school. Our town had built a new school that had 6 different grades in it, and we were in that school. In September of 1959, in our senior year, we were just starting our senior year. We were 17 years old, and we didn't really know each other. I had done well academically and athletically. I was the captain of the cross-country team and the co-captain of the track team. And Grandma was the head majorette. And she marched around with a tall white hat and her baton and her white boots with green tassels, and she marched out in front of the high school marching band at every football game. She was lovely. At the start of that year, I had set 2 goals for myself. One was to learn the names of all 265 members of our class. And since I already knew some of them from kindergarten on, it wasn't impossible, and I did that. So that I could walk down the hall and say hello to everybody I passed by name. The other goal was maybe a little bit harder to think about. I was going to date every single girl. That's about 135 girls, and I would have been a busy boy. I really hadn't figured out girls at a stage of my life, and I'm not entirely sure that I have yet, but I'm working at it. I was determined to try, and I saw this really pretty girl walk down the hall, and I stalked her. I knew what time of the day, it was after first period, before second period, that she came around the corner and went down the hall. I noticed that she wasn't with anybody, and I thought, well, maybe I could try and ask her out. And being the courageous person I was, and a good stalker, I found an unlocked janitor's closet. I went into the closet, closed the door, but just a crack where I could see who was coming around the corner, and there she was. And she went around the corner, and I slipped out and caught up behind her. And I said, would you like to go to the dance with me on Saturday? And what did she say? She had an opportunity prize, and what did she say? It was not a hard question. She said yes. That's what I've been teaching you. That's how you get. Always say yes. And she said yes, and without one word. She changed my life forever. The next weekend was a National Horse Show in Madison Square Garden in New York. We must have talked about horses while we were dating that first date, because I told her the master she'd like to go to the horse show with me, and we did. We took the bus over to New York City, got off the bus in Port of Authority building, walked up to Madison Square Garden, went to the horse show, got back to Port of Authority, and came home on the bus, and our parents were asleep. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that could happen today? They would have sent armed guard with us. And yet, it was a different time. It was a time of freedom, and we had a great time. I walked her to the door, and apparently the horses sealed the deal, because she grabbed me and first met Kinsey. We had a big family. I grew up my grandparents were in town. They had 4 daughters. The 4 daughters and their husbands lived in town. We always said we had 4 mothers and 4 fathers. The rules were the same every house. And there were 9 of us, cousins, my sister being the only girl. There's kind of a little parallel that I pointed out. So Aunt Jean and Isabel have lots to talk about. They talk about boys, but not the way girls usually do. And Liz had almost no family in the United States, none in New Jersey. So here she was being introduced to a rather large family, and she had none. And on the other hand, here was a girl coming into the family, and they were, oh, it's a girl. It's another one. And so we were starting to collect girls into our family. And they were very, very welcome. My grandmother and grandfather were terrific people, and they loved Liz right from the start. And she was so attracted to them because she didn't have grandparents either. She really enjoyed having them. Pretty soon, we started to play cards with them. Grandpa liked to play pinochle, so that was our most common date, was to go and play pinochle with Grandma and Grandpa. And we enjoyed that. And one card session, we always played at their dining room table. Grandpa would be to the left, Grandma to the right, Liz across from me and me here. Grandpa had a passion for cigars, and he smoked White Owl cigars and Dutch Masters. And the evening that I'm going to tell you about, he had his cigar, as usual, sitting in his ashtray. It happened to be between where Liz was sitting and where he was sitting. And I saw the twinkle. It's something that I got used to after a little while. I just saw that little glimmer of mischief. Here's Grandma with the cards in her hand, and she reached over and picked up Grandpa's cigar and went, and just put the cigar back down in the ashtray. I looked at my grandfather, and there was no room for more smile than he had. He was just so happy, and of course, Liz just was organizing her cards, and nothing happened. What's the big deal? Kind of that. And I was sure that by the time I took her home that night, that every one of my aunts had been called and that story had been related. I'm virtually positive of that. And I often say that Grandpa was like the Grinch that night. His heart grew 3 sizes, just like that. Thanksgiving of 1959 came around. Our almost all-boy family met Grandma, and as I said, they loved her immediately. My aunts gathered around her and coached her. Now, if he gets out of line, you make sure you always have mad money with you, because you may need to call somebody or call a taxi. And if he gets fresh with you, you just kick him in the shins. I don't do that, says Aunt Helen. I dig him with my fingernails. Thanks, ladies. Graduation came from high school, and then summer, and then we were off to college. She went away to Boston to Endicott Junior College, 2-year school, and I went to Rutgers to the College of Agriculture in the middle of New Jersey, so we were not together anymore. But there were many, many letters and phone calls, as you might imagine. We kind of had met each other by that point. We were pretty interested. After 2 years, Grandma graduated and came home and moved in with her parents and took a job in a local business. I was still working hard at school. In the fall of 1964, I was very fortunate to be accepted into the freshman class at Cornell University College of Veterinary Medicine. But that's in Ithaca, New York, and so we were even further away. In the fall of 1964, getting off track here, Thanksgiving of 1964, I came home from Cornell on vacation. This is a terrible thing that girls do to guys, but I called her to tell her I was home and to see what she wanted to do. And she said, we talked about whatever, and then she said, now there's one other thing I want to talk to you about, and that is, if we're not going to get married, I think we should start dating other people. That wasn't nice. Honestly, I felt stabbed in the heart. I called my go-to guy, my oldest cousin, and I said, Malcolm, this is what she said and what to, I said, I don't know what to do. I have 3 more years of school before I could possibly get a job and make any money. I have no money. I have no place to live. I just room in one room with another guy. I don't know what to do. And I got the best advice that I ever got in my life. I can't use all the words, but he said, why don't you marry her, expletive? Well, I thought about that. And then I called her maybe the next day after I recovered. And I said, would you like to get up early on Thanksgiving morning and go to Eagle Rock? Was a big prominence near in North Jersey, near where we live. You could see New York City. And we could go to Eagle Rock and watch the sun come up, watch the sunrise. And she said, oh, that'd be fun, let's do that. So we did. And the sun did come up. And the city was sitting there in the sunshine looking beautiful. And my wife and my girlfriend, my love, was standing there looking beautiful too. And I said to her, would you like to get married? Now, this is Elizabeth Charlotte Merkel we're talking about, the same Liz that you've gotten to know over the years. And she said to me, you know I would, quit fooling around. After a while, I was able to convince her that I was trying to be serious. And we went on to Thanksgiving at both houses, both her parents' house and our big family, with 19 people around the same table, and now she's number 20, and maybe 21, I can't remember. There were other girls coming into the family at the same time. We worked it out. I didn't know how we were going to do it at first, but on June 12th of 1965, we were married, right there. We had a lot of help from our parents, and we were able to buy a place to live. It didn't matter to her. She was so happy. It didn't matter to her that her first home had wheels and tin siding, and that was fine with her. She was just as happy as she could be. After a little while, and it didn't take long, many of my other classmates, which were almost all guys in those days in the veterinary schools, we only had 2 girls and 58 guys, and a few of us were married, but all the single guys soon learned that if you stop by to see Jen around at 4:30 or so, probably we're going to get dinner. And so she met a lot of our classmates exactly that way. In January of 1968, there is a conference every January at Cornell, and veterinarians from the area come back and get a little continuing education. And then if they decide they would like to hire a senior for their practice, they would have an opportunity to talk about that. And all of my classmates were buzzing around talking to this vet and that vet, and talking about what kind of practice and how much you're going to make and where you're going to be. And they asked me who I interviewed with, and I said, nobody. And they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I only know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to take a job. And 2 years later, the guy wants me to buy his practice, and then I've got a house mortgage and car payment and probably kids. It's not what I want. The professor called me in and said, what are you going to do, Jim? I hear you're not doing anything as far as getting a job goes. And I said, I'm not. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to Australia. I think there was a book about that, wasn't there? School teachers, some little boy that wanted to, he was having a very bad day, to go to Australia. Well, I was having good days, and still I wanted to go to Australia. Dr. Loomis said, New Zealand is next to Australia, it's not too far away, and Pete Scribner, who graduated 2 years ago, is over there now, and I have contact information. Well, I got in touch with Pete. He said, there's a job available if you were here tomorrow. I could put you to work in the practice that I'm in. And that comes with a house and a car, and you'd be set. And I remember jumping up and down like an idiot. I was so excited, and my lady, my bride, was just as excited as I was, because my dream was always her dream. This is interesting. This is historic. You need to remember this about your grandmother. A friend of hers said to her, "Liz, where is New Zealand?" And she said, "I don't really know. All I know is that you go to California and turn right." Now that comment right there may well have inspired somebody to invent GPS. I think that may be true. So all through we went through San Francisco and through Hawaii and saw several of the islands in Hawaii, and then off to Fiji and Samoa, and had great experiences meeting people there and just doing what we could on the way. And finally we landed in Auckland, New Zealand, the biggest city on the North Island, the biggest city in New Zealand, and which wasn't big. And this friend from the practice in Okanaki picked us up, drove us back down, and showed us the house that we would live in. And she wandered around that house, and she was so excited. It had a refrigerator about 3.5 feet tall. About 25 years ago, we saw one of those in somebody's basement, maybe. They were not up to date over there. It did have central heat. There was 2 fireplaces, one in the dining room, one in the living room. And none of that bothered her at all. It had a Ringer washing machine. There were no showers in the bathroom. There was a bathtub, but she didn't do bathtubs. And to get to the shower, you had to go outside and then back into this little laundry room. It was her house. She was very, very excited about it. So anyway, we moved in there, and oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, she smuggled a little person into New Zealand. He was about 4.5 months along, and would be born in December of 1968. Not in a hospital, but in a house. The women went and had their babies at what was called a cottage hospital. Pretty much each town had one, and they were operated by midwives. There was a doctor in town, but he was a GP. And the midwives, one from Scotland, one from England, were still friends of ours. And in December of 1968, she went down the road to the cottage hospital, and a little while later, we came home with a baby. Never a whimper, not a problem. Don't all people do it that way. New Zealand has plunket nurses. This is just a little interesting fact. And they come to your house at least once a month when you have a new baby. They measure the baby, they look things over, they weigh the baby, and they make sure everything's going the way it's supposed to and get you off to a good start. Another lady had called after a while, after Kelly was a little older, and invited my wife to go horseback riding. And she had another GPS failure. Horse went left, she went right, and she hit a concrete water trough and broke her arm. So we went down to the hospital and had her arm set, and here she sits now in plaster with a baby with cloth diapers and drinking from a bottle, and none of that bothered her one little bit. She just did it. I was always very, very proud of her. Then this little episode is called the hunting trip. I wanted to go hunting in the middle of the North Island. I've not been there before, and somebody gave me a phone number of a guy to call over there, and I called Les Thurston. Les said, yeah, I'll take you out. Set up a time, just about to hang up, and he said, hold on a second, hold on, are you married? I said, yeah. He said, bring your wife. I said, well, she's about 8 months pregnant, and we have a little boy. It's a year-old little boy. And he said, that's all right, I've got 5 daughters. Bring her on, bring them along. And we did, and off we went hunting. We were out in our tent, and that first night, the tent flap opens up. A guy I never saw before stuck his head in, looked right at me, and said, Jim Kinsey? I said, yeah. He said, your presence is requested at the Tie Happy maternity home. So off we went. Into the Land Rover, back over to the Thurston's house. Didn't know the Thurstons, really. The 5 little girls had a bathtub full, had my clothes all laid out, had a meal ready for me, and a map drawn to the maternity home. I got there in time to meet Jeff. He was delivered. They wrapped him up in a blanket and handed him to me. And he was early, and so they did not want to send him home yet. Liz and I packed up and went back to Okanaki and left Jeff there. And we called every day to see how he was doing. And all of that, she just took in stride. And having your water break in somebody else's bed that you'd never had before isn't necessarily what most people would consider your routine. Not her. The only thing she said was that Dr. White, who did the delivery, had just come back from Vietnam, where he was treating wounded warriors. She said, Dr. White didn't have very good bedside manner. All she had to say. We got back home and got settled into our house again, and a drought was on in our area. There was no grass. They packed the cattle up on trains and shipped them to other parts of New Zealand where there was some feed. And I had nothing to do. There was just no cattle there. And I still got paid, and I could just go sit on my surfboard, but if you know me, I don't do that very well. And so I started looking for another job, and wound up heading to a town of Balaclutha, which is on the South Island, almost at the southern tip of the South Island. It was a lot of sheep and cattle down there. And we packed up, this time 2 small boys, another strange town, another house. Not a problem. I worked there for a year, and we had completed our 3-year contract with New Zealand to work over there. And we were electing to go back to the United States, so we were packing up to return to the United States, and the phone rang. Now this time it was on a Tuesday night. And Max Patton from Forbes, New South Wales, here through the grapevine, but you might like to come work in Australia. And I said, no, by golly, I would, but we're just heading home, Max, to the U.S. He said, could you give me 3 months? I said, oh, I think so. I think yes. I'd love to come to Australia. Can you be here Saturday? I said, it's Tuesday, Max. I can't be here Saturday. I've got things to do. So we kept packing. We were there in short order and changed our travel plans. Now we flew to Sydney, bought a car, and we're off to Forbes. A lady friend of mine said, I'm tired of making friends. I'm going to just stay home with the boys and take care of them. And you go off and do your veterinary practice. And when we're done, we'll go home to the United States. The first day, the first day. I did the calls that were assigned to me, and I came back home. And there were 3 little boys in our driveway, all riding bikes, scooters, or something, some little mode of transportation. And there was Grandma standing in the door with her little baby in her arms and saying, "Anybody want cookies?" Anybody hear that before from her? And we're still friends with Dawn and Peter Prowse. They've been to the United States to visit us. That's the lady that didn't want to meet anybody. The magnet, the friendship magnet. She did it again. September of '71, we packed up one more time. A friend flew us down to Sydney. From Sydney, we went commercial to Melbourne, then to Perth, and then flew across the Indian Ocean to the little island of Mauritius, where they fueled up, and on into Johannesburg. Just through the grapevine, it's a campfire talk, it's too much for tonight, or for this afternoon, but the professor of anatomy at Andersport, which is the veterinary school in South Africa, walked up to me. I had no idea he was going to be there. He said, "Dr. Kinsey?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm HPA Boone. You'll be coming home with us." Packed us up, took us to his house, met his wife and his maid over there. Betty was her name, I don't remember. And she could walk around that backyard with a laundry basket on her head. She was a pretty fantastic lady too. Anyway, we did that. We stayed with the Boones. They sent us over to Kruger National Park, where we got our first African experience with animals, and began to see elephants, and we began to see giraffes and all the things that I've been dreaming about for years. We were in a rondava, which is like a motel room with a grass roof. It was really neat. And then next we went up to southern Rhodesia, the Wankie National Park in southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. Victoria Falls is on the Zambezi River up there, and we saw the falls that were big and beautiful, all the time lugging 2 little boys with us. I will just tell you, because of our southern border, kind of leaks a little bit. At Victoria Falls, I started across a magnificent bridge across the Zambezi River, and on the other side, a guard from Zambia was standing there going, I noted he had a rifle on his back, and I decided, I can just remember Victoria Falls, I don't have to take that picture. So we turned around and went back. And then after a little bit more touring like that, we had a huge day. There was apartheid at that time, and South Africa and Southern Rhodesia both had racial conflicts that weren't acceptable to other places in the world. And so a lot of places would not accept airline flights from those countries. But there's a little country called Malawi, which was making a business out of letting them fly into Malawi and then just changing the flight. And now it was a flight out of Malawi to wherever, and that was okay. So politics abounded, and also it was a big day. We started out, I'm going to have to read this. We started out in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and finally landed in Nairobi, in Kenya. We were worn out, not such a good hotel. The next day, I actually put my bed across the door, so if anybody tried to break in, they would have to knock me out of bed first. And we didn't have that kind of problems over there. But anyway, we went to a better hotel, and then to Amboseli National Park, and we're in a tent there, and right across from there was Mount Kilimanjaro. just sitting there, fantastic. And here's my lady with 2 boys, cloth diapers, in a tent with green vervet monkeys running up and down the tent, smiling and laughing and having just as good a time as I was having, because my dream was her dream, always was that way. And I will also tell you that there is someone here tonight that stood on top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and you could do yourselves a favor and introduce yourself around. Maybe you'll find that pioneer. He's here. From Nairobi in Kenya, we packed up again our little 4-person entourage, went up to Athens, Greece. We visited the Acropolis, which is the hill, with the Parthenon on top. That's the building. And climbed those steps. You can't do it anymore. The steps have gotten so worn that the Greeks have closed it. You can go near, but you can't go into the Parthenon anymore. The temple is closed to public traffic. So we were privileged to do that. The Greek people are unbelievably friendly. We were traveling with, I haven't described our mode of transportation. We were traveling with, Grandma had Kelly by the hand and a suitcase full of cloth diapers in her other hand. I had a suitcase with our clothes and a suitcase with the boys' clothes, and Jeff in a backpack on my back. And that's how we traveled. I had Jeff off my back and leaned his backpack against a pillar in the Athens airport, and not one Greek walked by without patting him on the head, smiling at him, getting those big blue eyes looking at him. And they are very, very, very nice people. From Athens, we went to Stuttgart, Germany, where Liz's parents were a part of Germany, where her parents were born and raised. Aunts, uncles, cousins were there to help us, and we could rest a little bit, and life was good. And then we got back on planes, flew from Germany to Dublin, didn't get off the plane, just landed in and out of Dublin, and then over to New York City. From New York City, we got on a helicopter and we were flying over to Morristown, New Jersey, which is very close to where we were born and raised. When we were about to land, we looked out the window and there was a small mob of people, all my relatives, standing there with little American flags waving. And another guy in the helicopter said, "There must be somebody really special on this helicopter." I said, "There is, it's us." None of that was easy. Not what a normal lady would do, would volunteer to do. But as I said, my dreams were her dreams. Her abundant love for me was evident, very evident. And it was returned. Job searches took us to Manchester Center, Vermont. We were there 10 years. We were joined in 1972 by a third son. Grandma was never bored, poured her energy into taking care of her family. I will tell you that leadership is another thing that is not to be ignored in her personality or her resume. The Vermonters, as sort of a reputation they have of being a little bit closed to the outside world. She was the first, they called us, anybody that wasn't born in Vermont was a flatlander. And the Vermonts were called woodchucks. That's pretty much you either were born there or you weren't. Well, she weren't, and she was always involved in the schools and finally ran for the school board. She was the first non-Vermonter, person not born in Vermont, to have an elected office in our little town. And she did well on the school board. It didn't gel. Vermont's business environment is not good. It's what I always call close the door behind me. Vermont's not perfect, I'm here attitude, and yet tourism was their big business, and just to sum things up, Vermont wasn't the place for us. And a Swedish friend of ours invited me to come down to Georgia and look at this area, and I couldn't believe it. I told him, I said, Steve, I'm not going to Georgia. And he said, well, why not? I said, oh, it's flat, it's hot, poor, racial problems, you know, do you want me to go on? He said, no, I'm going down there next month. I think you better come with me. And so we did, and we saw Atlanta and couldn't believe it. Sat up on the top floor of the Weston Peachtree Tower at night and looked out over the city. He drove me all up through here, and I thought, this is unbelievable, beautiful. It was February. The cows were grazing. I thought, shit, they're not grazing in Vermont. There's 3 feet of snow. And it was just perfect. So I started to come down, looked around, looked at farms, and finally bought the farm we're on right now, and where we built our house. We've been here 40 years. A little over half of our lifetime has been spent right here in North Georgia. We are home. We love it. We've seen the world. My lady was very happy here. She, of course, met a gazillion of you and made friends. Every time she smiled at somebody, she had a new friend. And so we were happy to be here. On June 18th of 1998, sound familiar? We earned the titles that we love. Our first grandchild was born. Grandma and the other grandma must have raced each other to the airport. They were in Denver faster than I could even imagine. They were just gone, and they flew out to meet their new little boy. It would be October before I would get to meet him, but he's here now with his wife. And then it happened again in 2000, a double header. 2002, 2004. 2007 and 2010, and they kept on coming. We love it. As I told you often, that grandmother is the best job I have ever had, ever. We don't even need to say what grandma thought about being a grandmother. Woo, big time. The brain tumor, which was discovered in 2016, slowed us down, required some adjustments, but we all saw the strength, the courage, the resilience with which Grandma faced that challenge. I was happy to be there at her side and to help her and to love her. Somehow, the end doesn't seem appropriate for this story. An ancient Greek said, what importance you leave behind is not that which is carved in stone monuments, but that which is woven into the lives of others. Elizabeth Charlotte Kinsey has gently, quietly influenced so many people with her kindness, her friendship, her leadership, her humor, and her love. She led an extraordinary there are 1,000 little anecdotes which we should leave for campfire talks another time, but the the outrageous stuff that she would say every once in a while. And just, where did that come from? And it's just one after the next. A friend of ours related to me a story that I had told him about Liz when she was sick in her bed, and I was trying to get her out and help her into a wheelchair, and she was not going to cooperate. And pretty much you better accept what she is and isn't going to do. But I said to her, come on, Liz, you can't just lie there in bed all day. And one eye opens up, and she said, you want a bed? Well, King Midas was somebody that we all know about, sitting on his pile of coins and jewels and raking his hands through them. And we've often felt like that ourselves, Liz and I, except for one difference. It's our family and our friends that are our jewels. And for a little parting thought for you, look for someone you don't know today, because not everybody knows everybody for sure. Look for someone you don't know and introduce yourself. You will have added a treasure to your life. We thank you very, very much for being here. That's what they call the standing ovulation in veterinary school. Thank you, folks.
That does conclude the services. I'm going to let everybody go ahead and end it in here. If you want to talk with the Kinseys, you're more than welcome to. And I appreciate everybody coming. Thank you.